2 years after the war ended in 1867, black men could vote. And this is very important because finally they have a say in what is going to happen in their life politically. The reason why the vote was so important for blacks, it was a chance for them to actually have a say in how the government was going to be run, whether it was local, state, or federal. The interesting thing about this is that locally, blacks had more issues. It was very difficult to get anything passed. However, blacks were involved very much in the state and federal level, even holding political positions. In our collection, we have a document, is the registration of black voters, or in this case, colored voters, in the township of Midlothian from 1870. And this document deals with black men, because the amendment only says that men can vote at this time. Over various amount of days in May of 1870, of these men finally getting a chance to register to vote. Finally, you have black men, and I keep emphasizing that, black men get a chance to actually have some kind of control, something that they didn't have before the Civil War. Most of them were Republicans. However, the Republican Party was very much split in the black community. You had both your conservative and you had your radical. And the conservative ones were most of the time already free before the war. They had set up businesses, they were ministers, and they got along with the white community and depended on the whites for their patronage. The radical side of the Republican Party was actually the freedmen who didn't have the same jobs, the same opportunities, and were very vocal to the point that sometimes riots would break out within the city or in the surrounding areas. And this was a big concern among the conservative blacks because they felt like they needed to be able to work along with whites. And the reason why you have this conflict in the first place is because whites have now got to learn how to live with free black people. And so you've got two races clashing at this particular period of time because a lot of the free people wanted the same rights and felt like they deserved the spoils of the war, and it wasn't exactly happening.
With the election of 1875, there was a deal that was cut, unbeknownst to a lot of the electorate, between the Republican Party and the state officials in the former Confederate states. March of 1876, federal soldiers were removed, and these former Confederate officials were allowed to come back into power. The former Confederates who were coming into power then were allowed to, how could I say, revert back to some of the old ways that had existed prior to the late war, and which mean they, how could I say, eliminated a lot of the black voters by a lot of methods, and mainly the method that was used was through intimidation. The Ku Klux Klan, the Knights of the White Camellia, a lot of those organizations that were used to intimidate black voters. Because they were intimidated, a lot of the black voters stayed away because not only was it against them, but it was against their families. So they decided that it was best sometimes to stay away from the polls. Plessy versus Ferguson was a major Supreme Court case, and the Supreme Court decided in 1896 the separate but equal doctrine, and that doctrine lasted for 40 to 41 years, and in that doctrine sprung Jim Crow laws. There were a lot of stipulations that were made for black voters, like poll tax, the grandfather clause. They said they didn't want to go back to slavery, but it was a form of slavery in a way. Maybe not physical chained, but there were other ways and other means that to me seemed to be slavery all over again.